and we're live right now. So good evening, everyone. Well, good evening here. We're in London. Two of us are in London. Good afternoon for everyone else. Today's Halloween. Very good Halloween for everyone. So if you're adults, you're probably having a good drink and having good food. If you're kids, then you're probably rotting your teeth. And with me, I have a special Halloween stream midweek. I have a gentleman called MPX. He's here in London with me. You're in London, right?
No, I'm in the north of England. So
All right,
not
I
quite
guess
long.
you're a little bit further north. And is a artist and he works mostly digitally, I presume. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Very good. And he's got some very intriguing work to show. And then to my left or right, I have someone that most of you probably have already came across, Doug Garret. He's all the way in. Why don't you tell us where you are exactly tonight? We're not going to
I'm
dox you,
in
but
I'm in Tennessee over in the United States.
that's it. It sounds very good just by hearing you saying it. I like to have some background music, but I don't want to risk the setup I have here. So we go without music. We'll do our own music with our voices. So Doug has a project right now on Indiegogo, finishing his campaign pretty soon. So we'll go over it uh, as soon as possible. In the meanwhile, MPX, it's a gentleman that has been doing his own art for some time. He wants to join the comic book ranks, but maybe you can tell us in your own words what sort of work you do and exactly what is the future plans you got. So you want to screen share a little bit of because I have a few of your pictures here. Some of them are very intriguing. But
Yeah,
it's
I should be
probably
screen sharing if I've pressed the right button.
so I'm just gonna make sure everybody can see you here.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks for having me on, and nice to meet you, Doug. It's like I'm looking forward to Lone Wolf. It's yeah, so I'm kind of an artist, like you said, I mainly work digitally. Well, a kind of combination of traditional art and digital art. I usually draw with pencils and then kind of do the colouring in Photoshop and things like that. Most of my work tends to either be horror or science fiction, with a little bit of kind of dabbling in the superhero genre, but it's not. I don't think it's the thing that I'm best suited for usually. But it's most of my work's kind of horror, kind of surreal and kind of dark and macabre.
I like
as
that
much as possible.
The previous one, man. You want to show me the previous one? There we go. Zoom in on that. Is that Alanis Morissette?
No, it's not her, but I suppose it looks a bit like her.
Something. Oh no! Wait a second. Is that Jessica Jones? What's her name? I forget the name of the actress. But he's giving me
Kristen Ritter, I think the actress is. Yeah.
Yes.
No, it's not her. No.
Very good. This one reminds me. What's her name? The blonde one, the tall blonde one that also sings. I forget her name now. Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift. Rotting up poor thing. All right, so well, tell us, you got fine arts education or you're self-taught? Well, what's the deal?
No, I'm not kind of formally taught. I'm just kind of self-taught, kind of mainly a hobbyist. I've done the odd bit of commercial work for White Wolf and Interzone and things like that, but mainly just for fun. And then kind of, so I've been doing like my own comic books and things. And then about a year ago, so I started watching EVS's streams and Edwin Boy on kind of Comicsgate, kind of started to get into the Comicsgate community and see kind of how vibrant and interesting it was for kind of indie comics where, you know, sometimes, I mean, I've kind of been at conventions and stuff around indie comics a lot, and there's a lot of great stuff in indie comics, but there also tends to be a kind of certain vibe to indie comics that's a bit like independent films in the sense of at their most cliched, they can be a bit stereotypical in the sense of it's something deeply worthy kind of thing. Whereas the great thing about Comicsgate is it's this explosion of genre indie comics, of like comics that are intended to be entertaining as well as kind of all other kinds of things, and they're not the traditional sort of indie comics, at least in my experience. So it's great seeing everybody's projects, seeing kind of getting inspired by other people doing projects, and kind of thinking about what kind of project maybe I could do, looking for collaborators, that kind of thing. So it's been really good.
You mentioned you've done some comics already. So what's the deal with that? Is that something you've crowdfunded, self-published?
I'd self-published a couple of comics, and kind of just in small numbers. They're kind of free online now, kind of thing. Other than that, it's kind of I kind of fell out of comics for a while. I used to be a big comics reader.
Is it web comics you were saying, or they were available physically as well?
No, they were physical comics, and I just take them to conventions and stuff. But it's difficult because it's like you don't, usually what I do is say if I go to a convention, I kind of book a table and take some comics. But mainly it was selling original art and commissions that covered the cost of the convention, because if you're not a known creator, you don't sell that many actual copies, but people will respond to the kind of the art, and they liked original art and stuff. So
yes. You kind of do like the prints, and that's usually what sells the most, isn't it? A lot of comics.
Yeah. So I mean, that was a lot of fun going to artist alleys and things of comic conventions, but it's I think I kind of fell out of the habit of doing comics or seeing the point of it, because it was such small numbers of people that I'd say maybe buy the comic or read it. So you kind of think like, well, just a vanity project kind of thing, I can do other things. But with Comicsgate, it's kind of been great seeing how excited people are for kind of sharing and reading each other's creations and kind of the fan base and stuff. So it made me think like, I'd really like, I've got plenty of ideas for stories that I always meant to get around to doing. And now it seems like this is a perfect time to kind of become an indie comic creator with such a kind of vibrant scene.
And your comics are all in this style as well, this painterly, surrealistic style?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Really, I like to think I've got my own style, but I also like to think that I kind of, I kind of tailor the artwork to the needs of the story to a certain extent. So my default is to kind of fully paint artwork and stuff, but it depends on what I'm doing. So, for instance, this was a test page that I did for Case File Arkham. Unfortunately, it wasn't successful, which is a shame because it's a really cool comic. But because it's a kind of noir story and the comic's black and white, I was like, I'll try and recreate that kind of old, James Cagney black and white film kind of vibe to it. So it really depends on the project. So I think I get bored easily just drawing in one style all the time. So some of my stuff's more cartoonish and some of it's more kind of realistic. But
yeah, I've seen this before. This is pretty cool. These kind of washed down grays. Like it's got this almost like a watercolor effect on kind of the backgrounds, but at the same time it looks just like pastel, just like a dirty pencil. So it's pretty cool, man.
No, thanks. Yeah, I'm kind of it's like anything you do. Like I'm always looking for kind of feedback, like constructive criticism and feedback, and kind of trying to get better kind of thing, because it's art's like any one of these things where you get too close to it, you can't really tell what's working, what's not, and that can lead to kind of you not seeing when you've done something right, and also kind of not seeing when you've done something wrong, kind of thing. So I think one of the things that I'm looking to get out of actually doing a comic project, like a graphic novel or something, which I haven't done for a long time, is kind of just to improve my skills a lot. Because I think if I, did kind of 30 or 40 pages of a story, by the end of it, I'd kind of be a much better artist in terms of my storytelling and kind of narrative abilities. Because the problem with just doing, pin-ups and stuff is that they can be quite static and kind of, they don't necessarily push you with the same skill set that you need for actually doing the sort of the narrative storytelling that comics require.
Now, looking at your stuff, especially there on the sequential pages, I feel a lot of gives me a feeling of early career Bill Sienkiewicz, and also a bit of Giger, really. More.
Yeah, big fan of Giger. Big fan of Bill Sienkiewicz as well. It's a shame he's such a knobhead on Twitter, but there you go. It's like
Yeah, total dickhead.
Yeah, it's like it's never meet your heroes kind of thing. But yeah, but he's a brilliant artist. I mean, for me, my entry into comics was twofold. It was American comics, kind of things like Daredevil, like the Frank Miller run and things like that, and 2000 AD British comics. So I really got into kind of Judge Dredd in 2000 AD, and so artists like Simon Bisley and kind of Glenn Fabry and people like that are huge influences on me. So it's kind of, Mark Harrison, people like that. So it's difficult to kind of, you always want to go past your influences and develop your own style, but at the same time learn from these great artists as much as you can and kind of try and nick bits that kind of that work, kind of thing. I think you get a real appreciation for how difficult being a comic artist is when you actually try and do it, because it's like from the outside, if you've never done it, you look at it and you go like, oh yeah, it's drawing. If you can draw, then you can do a comic, and it's not you can, lots of people that can be brilliant at drawing or art, but actually making a story, making it flow, telling the story is is its own skill set that really requires a lot of discipline and a lot of hard work. So I've got enormous admiration for the guys that kind of that can work really quickly and kind of produce like a page a day or something like that.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's quite an accomplishment. A page a day, it's tough. Working on a schedule of 20 days to produce 20 pages, it's really tough.
Yeah,
and obviously they follow a very strict routine, step by step. Pencils to inks, and then inks to other parts of the team, colors and all that. Obviously, this sort of work that you do is it's a little bit more complicated to actually be paced out like that.
Yeah.
When you're saying you got then your future projects in terms of comics, are you thinking on doing an American format kind of thing, or when you said graphic novel, you're thinking more into going into the actual European graphic novel size in terms of what are you actually going to be producing? Because I can see your canvas here; they're quite wide, so maybe you need a little bit more room to make them breathe. What are you going to go for?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think definitely in terms of the aesthetics of it, I'm like, because I'm kind of European, I grew up with European comics, and all those great European creators that went and became big at the big two kind of in the 80s and stuff. My sensibility is definitely towards things that you don't get a lot of in American mainstream comics, like fully painted artwork. So like something like Dave McKean on Arkham Asylum is like, for me, he's utterly brilliant, but it's not the kind of thing that you usually see in kind of American comics, because like you say, it's very much, I mean, it's brilliant work, but it's very much of a style of, there's a penciler, there's an inker, there's a colorist. Whereas I think what I want to do is kind of reintroduce a bit more of the kind of the fully painted stuff that you still see in like French comics and things like that, but it is less and less prevalent in kind of British comics, unfortunately. So I'd like to do the kind of fully painted style of art. And in terms of the format, I mean, if I was doing it and money was no object, I think I'd do kind of A4 comics, because that's what I grew up reading. But again, you've got to tailor it to what the audience wants and what the audience expects. So, I mean, running Indiegogo, I get the impression from Comicsgate that a large chunk of the audience are American, and kind of, so American format comic books are probably what they'd be most familiar with and be most eager to kind of consume. It's difficult to know though, because it's like, you're balancing the production costs with what you can charge reasonably for people, especially being an unknown creator. But definitely, whatever the physical format of the book, I definitely prefer kind of long form stories, kind of graphic novel style, kind of fully painted stories. Like serial issues are kind of great, but I mean, I used to read tons of American comics, but I just fell out of the habit of doing it, partly because the stories just were so unsatisfying to read in these kind of 15-page chunks kind of thing. And I find a kind of complete story from start to finish much better than something that's constantly connecting to a wider universe, or kind of has characters that pop into it that you don't know their backstory, and it's some crossover event or something like that. Which, I mean, those things can be great fun, but they're not kind of my cup of tea in terms of what gets me creatively going anyway.
Yeah, I mean, comics and their relevant actual size. It's the one case where things are mutually exclusive. So the American comic book art is very much made in synchrony with the actual physical size of the actual board of the actual final product. So it's very important that panels and dynamic figures actually
Yeah.
fill in that space in a relevant way. And again, European style format, graphic novel, which is slightly wider to the side, to the
Mm.
sides, and also top and bottom is slightly wider as well. So it's more like a squarish format. A lot of times there's a lot of that space in it actually, and one wonders, oh, this will probably fit into a more rectangular format. But again, it's got its own aesthetics because the European artists that when they do graphic novels, they again they fill in that space in a relevant and special way. So again, it is mutually exclusive. So both ways to go at it have their own rules basically, and those rules
Yeah.
have to be understood to make the book work. And that's
Yeah.
something that it's got to be learned. It's difficult
Oh
to
yeah.
make
Yeah.
it work perfectly well. Anyone can do it, but to do it magnificently well takes and again back to Bill Sienkiewicz, beginning of his career, first couple of graphic novels I read from him. I think one of them was Daredevil, and again I think he was working on a broader format.
Yeah, that
The
was an
graphic
oversized
novel.
book. Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Because if I remember well, his Daredevil graphic novel from '84 or '85, whatever it is, I believe he's got a lot of that space on the sides.
Yeah.
I mean, not on the sides, on the top and bottom. So it's kind of working on a wider format, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think that was kind of. I don't know if it was quite A4 or even wider than A4, but yeah, it wasn't usual US format. Something like Alchemist Asylum, I think's the regular US dimensions. But yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I hadn't really thought about it in that much detail, but you're right. It's like I mean, it's interesting. I saw a tweet today from Dr. Apple talking to someone about whether he'd offer Bigfoot Bill as a digital comic or not. And he said he wasn't going to because for him, the physical book itself was part of the art. It wasn't just a delivery mechanism for the story in the book. It was part of the creation. And it kind of reminded me a little bit of what people like Christopher Nolan say about film,
Yeah.
where they're very keen to shoot on film because the physicality of it is an integral part of like the creative process. It's like it is the thing, the actual film stock with the images on it. And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, I think I'd be more inclined to I'm more agnostic about digital or physical. I prefer reading physical, but at the same time, there's a big convenience saver in digital. And, for certain things, I prefer digital. So it's like, but I can see why people can be attached to that thing and why it matters to them. And it's definitely interesting that the comics get thin, at least anecdotally from my perspective. The majority of consumers definitely seem to prefer physical books rather than digital books, which is a good thing to see, I think, overall.
Yeah, I mean it's I think I heard that thing from Dr. Apple. I think I read that saying that, and yeah, I mean a book is a book. I mean I think digital is great. It looks great in some devices. The colors really blow up. Because again they've been done digitally, and I think it can kind of be fun and interesting to move from panel to panel on an iPad, but nothing replaces a book. I mean, the book is a completely different beast. You need a book. It's a completely different form of pleasure that you take out of a book by going page by page. I've always said it's something very it's a very private relationship between a reader and a book.
Yeah.
Going really mad on it, it's something very special. While digital, again, it's always colder. There's always a big distance between the reader and the actual work. But yeah, I mean, I have nothing against a digital version of the book, none at all. I just obviously, I mean, there's no way, nowhere that I would ever consider launching something and not make it available as a physical copy. That's completely out of the question. I mean, first and foremost is a physical copy. But if there's a digital copy to go with that, that's great. There is though something that can be added to that, which is, for example, what Comixology does. I think they're still the only ones doing that, which is like they grab the books and then you can go on multiplay, whatever they call it. I forget what it's the actual the term they came out with, but the book will play itself. As you're looking at it
Oh
on
yeah,
a,
yeah.
on a handheld device. They don't do that to all the titles. They only do that to the big top AAA titles. The Marvel Avengers or Spider-Man or whatever. But then the book just kind of reads itself. The camera will kind of move from panel to panel, from character to character, to individual balloons and all that. You can pause the thing so you can take time to read, and you can zoom in on the panel, and then you can resume play again. You probably have seen that.
Yeah,
That's kind of cool as well. But
Yeah.
I tried it out, and I completely screwed up. I completely lost the plot, and he's kind of trying to make a stop motion movie out of kind of making an animated comic basically. And
Yeah.
again, he's got his strengths. But I think he's got more minuses than cons.
I know what you mean. Like, I don't like consuming comics like that myself, just because it's like I like to like to let my eye linger where it wants to, kind of thing, rather than it be like an animation. But I do remember, like, Brian Michael Bendis and Alex Maleev's, whose art I think is fantastic. I love his art. They did a Spider-Woman run, and I think some of those took it one step further, and actually the digital versions really tried to animate the panels and stuff, which was an interesting experiment. But at the same time, I just think there's something like there's an interest. I saw an interview with Frank Miller once, and it was a really interesting way he put it, which he said that in the 80s, when he was working on comics, one of his big inspirations was to try and make comics more cinematic. So he was like looking around at the comics of the late 70s and looking at films and thinking comics should replicate the sort of idioms of cinema more. And then moving into the kind of late 90s and the 2000s, he decided that he wanted to do the opposite and make comics move away from cinema, because you could do things in comics because it's static that you can't do in cinema. Like, it's that kind of thing of actually leaning into what's unique about the medium. And I think for me, it's kind of, that's one of the most interesting things, is when, take for instance lettering or something. It's like, I love it when projects are really inventive with how they use lettering to add to the artwork, to add to the overall experience, rather than just having lettering as kind of a delivery mechanism for the dialogue or the exposition. It's like the whole thing, if you leverage it correctly, kind of come much greater than the sum of its parts, which is something that you can't get. You can't get that combination of text and still images in film, because it's a different medium by definition. So I'm not against anyone that likes animated comics or reading comics like that. I think it's fine. The more people read comics and all different varieties that they're presented, the better. But for me, I suppose I'm a bit of a traditionalist. It's like, at my best, I'd rather have a physical book with that's really nicely produced, that kind of has some kind of real design thought that's been gone into the whole package of it, kind of thing. I mean, that was one of the things that actually put me off regularly buying American comics, is that slowly but surely over time they became infested with kind of adverts and visual noise that just really took away from the pleasure of the physical reading of them. And so I just switched to trade paperbacks exclusively, because for me, it kind of, you're trying to get into the story and the art and that world, and then you just suddenly see something incredibly visually jarring, which is like an advert by some completely different artist in some completely different style for something else, and it just takes you out of it. It'd be like having an advert in the middle of a film or something. It's like it breaks the mood. And I think, I'm not one of these people that thinks that the road for comics to go down is to get cheaper and get kind of adverts in them and make themselves kind of bargain basement. I think it's a bit like vinyl and music, which is like, vinyl's never going to be mass market in the way that digital downloads are. There's no point pretending that. There's no point going back to the newsstand model of like, the 1960s or something. You have to kind of go, it's a niche product, but it's got a dedicated fan base that love high quality things. And, doesn't exclude different ways of doing it. But I think for me, that's kind of my approach to it, which is, it's like, if you're a vinyl aficionado, you want a brilliant piece of vinyl with an amazing kind of album cover on it and kind of all kinds of things associated with it, because you want to cherish it as an object. It being a little bit cheaper or it being something else kind of doesn't, if you're interested in those things, then you're just going to get the digital download or the streaming service,
Yeah. I mean, we all want, in the end of the day, we all want a nice copy of our book in a hardback with kind of a leather cover and silk pages. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's about, of course, the other side is the pragmatics of it, which is like, you've got to print a book, you've got, especially as indie creators, like, you know, it costs money to print these things, and you want to be fair to the consumer, because, I mean, I think, I don't think it's an illegitimate criticism of Comicsgate in general that people are paying a premium for the books. Now, I think people are doing it with their eyes open, in the sense of they're going, I want to support something that might otherwise not exist, and I want to kind of pay extra for that. But at the same time, I don't think long term it's going to be that sustainable a model to pay, you know, $25 for, you know, for a 40-page book or something every single time, unless there's something exceptional about it. So I think it's you know, it's about getting the balance right. It's about kind of producing good quality products that people want, and, you know, and listen to consumers. And so if they say, well, we'd rather pay a bit more for this kind of thing, they're providing that. At the same time, if they say, I'd be happy to pay a little bit less and give up on something, that's fine. And I think that's kind of, I think everyone's kind of finding their feet. I mean, it's like, obviously the big pros kind of thing have got a much better platform and a much better set of intuitions about what their fans want, kind of thing. But I think as an indie creator, when you're trying to find a fan base, it's a little bit more of a kind of exploration of kind of, you know, the kinds of people that might be interested in any one of our work, kind of thing. What do they want out of comics, kind of thing? Because it's not necessarily the same thing. And it's a good thing it's not the same thing, because you want pluralism, and you want kind of, you know, diversity of output and diversity of kind of creative perspectives, I think.
What I love the most, man, is you always find myself a nice big hardcover book. And I think, talking about Doug Tenable again, I think he was doing that the other day on the stream. He opened up a book, or maybe it wasn't him, it was probably Mitch Brettweiser. He was opening up a sketchbook, and he said, look at this, you know, the quality of the letter here on the cover and the paper. And that's exactly what I like, man. I like to grab a nice, expensive, hopefully that I didn't pay for, art book, and open it up, and sniff that paper. Oh, man, it's this nice, shiny paper. Cover. Oh, I used to collect these art books from fantasy illustrators, you know, from Boris Vallejo and Frank Frazetta, and they used to be really good collection pieces book. And then eventually they Taschen, which is
oh yeah, I used to get those. Yeah,
a European publisher. I can't remember the guy, are Austrians or whatever they are, or Germans, whatever. And these guys, they took over the market, and they kind of they made a lot of books, which is great, because, you know, it gets to show these people to everyone. But the quality of their books, they brought down. There was a big kind of a niche market for those kinds of art books, and this was back in the late 70s, early 80s. Yeah. They were really high quality stuff, because they were rare. They were not like a series of books. They were different publishers doing those releases. And when they would do them, they would, you know, invest everything they had in book by book. So they'll have different sizes, different quality of papers, different covers, but they were all made to high quality. And then Taschen kind of hogs up that market, and then he kind of just streamlines the whole thing. And he screws up. He screws up in terms of colors, like making.
A lot of them were black and white, weren't they? Like, I seem to remember some of the ones that I got, like, they'd have a lot of black and white plates inside them. Which
that's another thing they would do. I mean, they do all the classic painters, right? And from Picasso's to Bosch, whatever, and they screw up the colors completely. I mean, they're like they start printing stuff with too much magenta or too much cyan and whatever. They screw up the colors completely. Some of them, like you said, they put everything in black and white. So I do have a lot of Taschen books, just because they're great in terms of the material they include, because they include a lot. And if people want to dig into classic painters and classic art and all that stuff, you know, Taschen, unfortunately, is the place to go. But before they were on the market, there were other guys doing those things, and they were doing it much more beautifully, much more eclectically. So, hey, I gotta pass the mic to Doug at the moment, because he's been patiently waiting there for his turn. Hey, Doug, you can interrupt anyone else anytime you want. You can insult the artist, anything you like.
Yeah, please insult me.
I was just enjoying listening to you guys talk. I mean, I'm not an artist, so I don't really come in, and also I'm not from the UK, so you guys have a completely different perspective than I do, and I was really enjoying hearing you guys talk about artwork and stuff.
Well, now you can give us your perspective. Actually, I'm gonna share your campaign right now, man. Okay, so I'm just gonna go here and do a little screen sharing for what you have right now on Indiegogo right now. Okay, I blew up the page here so we can see well. So this is being very well received, Lone Wolf. Obviously, you already gave your pitch several times to several other channels, but why don't you go ahead and tell to the little audience my channel here as what is Lone Wolf about, which is issue one, and it's available right now on Indiegogo for 2 more days. And then tell me what you're planning after this campaign ends. But just first, tell me what is it about. I'm gonna play the video here without any sound, so hopefully it doesn't break down. Go ahead.
Okay,
Stage is yours.
Lone Wolf. All right, Lone Wolf is about a 200-year-old Cherokee warrior. He was given a gift by his grandfather and he doesn't really understand the gift. He can't really control it, but he's the last protector of the earth. Um, he's a member of the Cherokee tribe, and among there was 5 tribes that made up the Cherokee, and from those 5 tribes, there was one person from each tribe that made up a group of protectors. And so all those people are gone, and he's left to kind of fend for himself and fight all the supernatural evil in secret that nobody really knows what's going on except for him.
Hmm. Now listen, I have mentioned to you before. I don't know if you remember, but I'm looking at your first pages that you shared here on Indiegogo, the black and white ones. These ones that I'm scrolling down right now. I really dig this grayscale you have here. It's not really grayscale. It's a kind of literally this is a wash. I mean, this is traditional art, right? This is and I can see here the page layout, and by other words, this is not being done digitally. This is all traditional art. I mean, I can see here the inks and all that. So your artist worked traditionally, and this, I presume, is a watercolor wash. Am I correct to say that?
Yeah, he is really old school. You know, he hand draws everything and scans it, and all this has actually been done actual size, like comic book size.
Mhm.
He just recently got started. He's with an oversized printer, so he can go into more detail. But he's actually a painter by nature, and I really love his painted stuff. But it takes so long to do that, so we just decided to go with digital. He's coloring it digital now.
Oh, okay. It's color. Yeah, I've seen the colors as well. Let me just zoom this out again because do what I intended to do. Yeah, I mean, I was mentioning to you once, and I really dig this black and white. He gave me a feeling just by seeing this little car here and the zombies here and all that, and of Night of the Living Dead, the George Romero movie, the original Night of the Living Dead.
Hmm.
So I really dig that. I dig all these horror stories told in the classic way. And when I saw this in black and white, I said, "Oh yeah, that's great. That's like the old drive-in horror Halloween movie, and brought back into the nice traditional comic book format. But then I saw the color ones. So now obviously you guys are going the color way. Which again, I mean,
Yeah,
I've seen
yeah,
already some pages.
we're going to offer the black and white as newsprint, so it'll be
Awesome.
completely, that old school, old comic feel
Wow, excellent.
with the black and white. I think that just completely retro. I think that would be really cool.
I really like black and white comics myself. It's like I know that maybe they're not to everyone's taste, but like I love those black and white editions they sometimes do from like DC and Marvel of books and things where you can see just the inks and like this Lone Wolf looks really good. Like I'm pleased you got so many backers and hopefully um, you managed to kind of get fully funded by extending the campaign and stuff because it definitely deserves to see print and stuff. Like it looks really cool.
Yeah, we've kind of got like we're doing the retro thing, so I know a lot of people now are really into like the modern styles and the superhero thing. But I just really wanted to do a throwback to the way comics were when I was a kid. And
Yeah.
Jeff had just got, his style just completely suits that. And I think a lot of people are kind of looking at that too, and most of our supports just come from word of mouth, people sharing on Twitter.
So how do you guys work together? Do you like write a full script with all the dialogue, or do you plot it out and then when it's drawn, you add the dialogue to it? How was your kind of working relationship like?
The way I work is like I outlined the whole story, and then I wrote out the script. And the script has very basic dialogue and captions and whatnot. And I'll send that to Jeff, and he'll draw the pages. And once the pages come back and we start lettering it, then we'll work on dialogue and change, some of the dialogue and some of the captions and stuff.
Is that interesting for you? Do you sometimes get pages back and think, oh, I didn't quite imagine it like that, and it's different, and that's changed your idea about how the dialogue is, or kind of?
Well, like usually the artwork comes back like it comes back a little different, but it's better than what I was imagining in my head. But I have had to change dialogue because, when you're writing it on a script, sometimes you notice that you repeat certain words, certain descriptions maybe. And so my comic, like I wanted to keep it real bare bones. A lot of modern comics, you open it up and it's like they've got so many bubbles that it's like a novel. And, I want the artwork to breathe. I want the artwork to tell plenty of story itself.
Yeah.
So I'm not, I don't write a ton of dialogue, but I want the dialogue to add to the artwork and not the artwork just be second to the dialogue. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like some books. I mean, some of the you watch some of the diversity in comics videos, and some of the books that he's like taking the mick out of. Some of the dialogue, it's just like a page of dialogue kind of thing. You just think, what's this about?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's doing no service to the artwork. It's like the artwork is just there to take up space. And I didn't want, I didn't want to be that way. I wanted to just add, to the artwork.
I think, for me, comics are a truly collaborative medium in the sense of it's like film or something. Like they only work really well when the story's good and when the art's good, and when the two come together, it'd be something bigger than either one would have been on their own. Like those are my favorite comic books, the ones that I read over and over again. That sort of magic, that light in the bottle, where you just had a brilliant story and art that perfectly fit it. And I don't think it's easy to do. I mean, I see a lot of comic books where I'll either like the story, but the art doesn't do anything for me, or I'll like the art, but the story's kind of bland and stuff. And it's, I don't think it's an easy thing to do to capture that kind of magic of, it's almost like a dance, like, people in perfect sync with each other. So it's kind of, it's one of the great things about comics, guys, seeing all these kind of new writer-artist collaborations and seeing what's possible, and kind of people finding people because they've got a common love of, say, horror, or they've got, it's like bands forming, isn't it? It's like you kind of say what your influences are and go, yeah, we think the same about this kind of thing.
Now, Doug made a very good point there about the art taking up space and the story being mostly told through the little balloons sprinkled out through the pages, almost making it look like a novel. That's a very good point, yes. And the art should be the main thing, yes. And the narrative, the text should be in service of the art, not the other way around. So that's very nice to be said. And I'm just going here through your perks, your tiers here. You want to walk through this as well while I scroll down, just so people, late arrivals to this campaign can see what they can get. So you got here, you're doing a T-shirt then, yeah?
Yeah, the artwork where that you were showing a few minutes ago that was water color, that is the artwork for the T-shirt.
This one here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just for the T-shirt, and we're only doing it for this campaign, so we'll never offer that artwork on the T-shirt again.
You putting this at the front or at the back of the T-shirt? Just out of curiosity.
It's going to be, I believe it's going to be on the front.
Okay. Because sometimes obviously people have time to put their picture, but this one here is just describing them. You got digital physical copy on the T-shirt. You're shipping worldwide, so that's great. Everyone wanting to.
Yeah, the worldwide shipping, like we had to charge like $20, and I really hated that.
Yeah, there's gonna be definitely
But
shirt.
it could make it. That's one reason why I wanted to offer the digital as well. Just
Mhm.
because I don't, like you guys were talking, I do not care for digital comics at all.
Yeah,
I didn't want to do digital, but then I thought, well, what if somebody really wants to read this and there's no reason, that they should have to pay $25 if they live across the
so
pond.
really,
So that's
really
why I
great
offered
price,
that.
man. Really great price on this newsprint. This is that black and white version that you were talking about. So in a newsprint paper, so slightly lighter paper, right? 22 pages
Yeah.
for $3. That's amazing. That's very nice. Worldwide as well. Wonderful. And then you go for, but then you got the digital here, the full color one, $5. And then you got for the same price, you get the physical one as well, yeah, and the digital. Yeah.
Yeah. And if anybody wants the black and white copy digital, as well as the color, I will be happily just send them both.
Okay. So that's something you can do as an extra thing. And then here you offer as well both of them. The black and white newsprint and the full color one, but plus the digital version, the color one, isn't it?
Yeah.
And $10 two copies. And so here, retro
Yeah.
suffer 5 copies of the newsprint one, and that's just the newsprint one, and the digital. And
Yeah.
here,
I tried to make it to where buy like four and get one free, pretty much
oh,
like that.
oh, you got different combinations. So digital with T-shirt, digital with the newsprint. Okay, I got it. So you got a bunch of a little bit of pick and mix kind of thing, isn't it? That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were talking about campaigns just before coming on, and yeah, that's always that's a problem that I had because I was offering a lot of different stuff, and I was putting here boxes for people to tick what they wanted. Then I would eventually ship based on that. This is another way of doing it, obviously, that you set up everything, so you have different variations of what you want to offer, and then people just click on the actual perk they want. So I don't know. Do they call perks here as well? Because perks is in Kickstarter. This is called
Uh, I, th-
perks here as well.
I don't know if it's perks or what it is. I just call them perks. So
You call them perks. All right. It comes into features, naming the book, and then you got here the highest tiers here where you add names on the tombstones, and some of them already gone here. I saw here right at the end, top ones. One
yeah,
name on the tombstone.
somebody bought the cover art and the first tombstone on
Awesome.
page 4.
But you still have a few available of this leader of the wolf pack. And this is the top one available. That gets
Yeah, that
everything.
one's got a little bit of everything in it.
All right, two sizes of t-shirts, awesome. And yeah, this is what I was talking about. This is what I've done as well. I included this kind of thing, so people would have to click on the link basically to then choose what sort of prints they wanted. So it just gives us a lot of extra work, isn't it? So but that's awesome. Yeah, so there you go. Pretty much everything available in terms of pick and mixing on your campaign. So that's pretty cool. Plenty here that people can have a look at. Take some time, a little bit of time here on the campaign page. Um, Pretty modest goal as well. So still need a little bit to get there, isn't it? So 2 days
Yeah,
left.
I can actually extend it, but I was really hoping that we could, maybe rally the troops at the last couple days and hit that without having to extend it any.
Well, we'll try. We'll
How
set
many more
some
backers would you
times.
need to reach your goal, do you think?
Oh, I haven't figured it up. It would be quite a bit because my perks are so cheap. Like
That's
that's
right.
that's
Yep.
what's that it kind of it helped, but it hurts at the same time, you know.
Mm.
It can certainly extend it. I mean, you have a fixed goal, right? And when you have a fixed goal, you automatically can extend for another, well, at least another 20 days, I think. So you have plenty of time to get exactly what you need from this campaign. And I'm pretty sure that if you extend this, and we'll keep on showing off this project, and I'm sure you can probably actually go much above that. So looks like a fun book. So which brings me to the next step here. I mean, uh, what gave you the idea for this book? Is this specifically a horror story, or is more like an adventure kind of a story?
Well,
So you got a hero, and it gives me a feeling of kind of a Blade kind of character, for lack of a different character that would probably be more suitable. But he's a guy that goes from place to place, finishing off these undead guys. So is this more an adventure, or is it straight horror?
yeah, I definitely want there to be a horror element to it, but it's got a lot of adventure to it as well. Like the character's 200 years old, so uh there's going to always be like two or three story arcs going on at the same time. There'll be what's happening in modern times, and then he'll flash back to a memory, you know, something will remind him of something that might have happened 50 years ago, 100 years ago, or something. So we'll get to see like all these adventures through time, but there's still going to be like these horror elements to it. There's going to be, you know, zombies and ghouls and werewolves and vampires and stuff like that.
Awesome. This guy is 200 years old. I mean, is it like we have, if you don't want to give it away because it's important to the story, but if you can, is he 200 years old because he's like he's been embedded with some kind of supernatural longevity, or is it because he's also an undead kind of character? It's like is his own zombie or something, or is like a vampire or something?
Well, he's 200. It's got to go. It goes along with the gift that his grandfather gave him,
Right.
where he's a protector of the earth. Like they have like supernatural type abilities, and that's what lets them live so long.
All right. Okay. Cool. So horror was always something you were interested in, or is it something you just wanted to explore for this particular book?
Well, I've always been kind of interested in. You know, I like all the old school, like you was talking about. Um, my mind just went blank.
The writers?
Night of the Living Dead,
Oh
and
yeah, I do believe in that.
but
That's
I always liked stuff like that that had some comedy to it that wasn't so heavy and dark. You know?
Night of the Living Dead is a pretty scary movie. I mean, I saw
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
It's I mean that's why, and I'm bringing us straight into the main topic for this evening. I mean, starting off with Night of the Living Dead, it's an awesome movie because low budget, black and white, and these guys, Romero was really starting his career basically. I think it was like a student movie. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was not a student movie as it was his university movie or whatever. No, it was like a student movie as these guys doing Night of the Living Dead. They're all a bunch of guys straight out of college, basically, straight out of film school, and they just got together and did this. As far as I remember, similar to what Sam Raimi did with Evil Dead, and uh,
Yeah.
and he's really well shot. I mean, he's the black and white in it. It's the contrast, the way everything is lit inside the house, and using the same kind of lighting for the outside. So he makes the people inside the house very vulnerable as you look at them as characters, as you look at them, because they're quite they're overexposed with the sort of lighting he's using. And then the zombies outside, they're not shot in the dark. I mean, it's proper night, but then there's proper lights outside shining on the actors playing the zombies as well, so you can see them clearly coming at the house. So it's quite a conflicting set of imagery, because you got the people inside the house, and today if you do a movie like that, you're gonna shoot those actors pretty much in the dark, with just enough light for you to see that they're there. And then outside, the zombies, again, the same thing. You're going to do it in a way that they're not overexposed. So obviously you get scared when you see them. You got to jump. But Romero doesn't do that. That's a very intelligent way of doing it, which is something that people are looking at the movie and they might not realize how it's actually being done. And again, I don't know if he does that for a question of budget because he wants to shoot everything with as much light as possible, so that it doesn't have any problems when he actually develops the film, which is always a concern when you were working back in the 60s and using old stock and whatever light was available. But the final effect is very dramatic. Is very good because it's for a movie they set at night with zombies. You have too much light in it, but that's exactly what makes it work because it makes the shadows, when they are shadows, much stronger. So all the dramatics inside the house, all the arguments between all the characters, you're allowed to see all that acting through the light, through how well they're exposed. And so it's a very interesting movie, aesthetically speaking. It's a great movie. And I was scared I peed my pants first time I saw it. I was a kid. I mean, I was one of those guys that I had my baptism of fire. I went through all these the scariest movies you could ever watch. I watched them when I was 8 years old and 7 years old and 6 years old. I watched The Exorcist. I sneaked down to my TV to watch The Exorcist, which was on TV, and I think I was probably 8 or 9. I mean, definitely not the sort of thing that you should be watching today. An 8 years old watches anything. I mean, he watches much worse. But back then, when I watched it, it was a few years after the movie came out. Again, it must have been the first time it was on TV, to be honest. Really late night, yeah, like after midnight, yeah. And it was definitely not the sort of thing you would watch back then. This was like early 80s. So I'm watching The Exorcist. I'm having the time of my life until I'm caught by my parents. And he hadn't got to the third act yet. He didn't got to the end yet. But I had seen enough. I had seen enough that I tell you, that night I couldn't sleep. I was just thinking about Linda Blair's eyes, the demon eyes. That it was a sleepless night, yeah. And the same thing with Night of the Living Dead, And I watched it when I was a kid, and they really stuck to you. Those movies really have, and that's why I think those movies have been able to live through the ages. They really had a big impact. They're really well crafted movies. Because if they weren't, they wouldn't have survived this long. So obviously, a lot of people will diss out those movies now and say, no, so they're old movies. You can do much better now in terms of what you can actually show on screen with prosthetics and CGI and all that. But compared to that, it's all rubbish. Modern movies, and then now obviously we can make the argument in favor of them or against them. But without a shadow of the doubt, those movies are very well executed. Both from the Night of the Living Dead throughout The Exorcist. And then after that, you got all the movies from the 80s. Werewolf in London.
I love Werewolf in London. I mean, I think sometimes necessity is the mother of invention, isn't it? And like something like American Werewolf in London, it's like they had to create practical effects for this amazing transformation. And like if you were doing that film today, you'd probably just CGI or whatever, and it just wouldn't have the impact. It's like, I mean, CGI is great, but it's kind of, I don't think there's any doubt that it's overused and there's been a de-skilling of that kind of practical effects.
Yeah, I feel the same way about The Thing. The modern version. I just didn't think was as creepy as the original with the practical effects.
Yeah.
If I could share the video, I would, but I don't know how the YouTube thing works in terms of copyright. But the remake of The Thing is one of those that always has to come up. I mean, it's not that old yet. I mean, they've done it. What was it? 5-6 years ago? It's 2012, I think. I was pretty interested in that because it was a movie. The original movie is not one of those movies that utterly fascinates me. It's not. I gotta say, it's not. I think John Carpenter movies, the first ones are his best. So really, that really cheap movie did really at the beginning of his career, Dark Star, which is mainly science fiction. I think that's actually his best movie. It's just perfect. Anybody has not watched Dark Star, just go and get yourselves a copy or watch on YouTube, whatever. It's fun. And then he does Assault on Precinct 13. She's a so-so movie, yeah. Then he does Halloween. I think Halloween is pretty solid. I think it has not aged that well, but it's pretty solid. And I think Escape from New York. I think it's and the Fog. I think they're actually probably some of his best movies.
Yeah, I really like
Although
Escape from New York. Like that was one of my early Carpenter films that just really kind of got me into him. Like it's
you,
just
you
such
guys,
a
you guys
such
dig
a
that one.
yeah. I think it's great.
I think it's a pretty solid premise. I mean, it looks good. He's trying to do. He's trying. I think he's trying to do epic filmmaking there. But obviously, it's not the sort of movie for that. I think the fog is good. Is also I think he works well as well. And then the thing I think is the most elaborate movie that he did, or the most expensive he did up to that time. And I think he works. I think he's good. I
There's
just
something really creepy about the special effects in the thing. Like this kind of like a lot of horror. It works because it plays to kind of these subconscious fears that people have, and it's like this idea of like the people around you could not be who you think they are, and this kind of some of the kind of visual manifestations of that, the kind of like head on a spider's kind of body is like, or kind of alien spider's body. It's like it's really creepy. Which I agree. I didn't dislike the Modern Thing remake. I thought the story and a kind of a lot of it was pretty well done, but the special effects just didn't have that same impact because there's something strange about practical effects where even though you know it's not real, the fact that it is tactile, I think convinces the eye in a strange way. Even though it looks less realistic, there's something about it that makes you think, yeah, but it's a real object on screen. Where CGI just kind of your brain discounts it on some level and goes like, yeah, it's like it's a computer animated thing, and it can't be as visceral or kind of grab your emotions in the same way unless it's incredibly well done, like Gollum in the Lord of the Rings or Thanos in kind of Infinity War. It has to be absolutely brilliantly well done to be that convincing, and most of the time it's not. So it's kind of like Star Wars and kind of that thing of like one of the things with the prequels was just their inability to recreate the aesthetic of the original because they could do too much. So in the absence of those constraints, they just did whatever George Lucas could think of, and often it didn't capture the same magic because you didn't have someone building kind of Luke's lightsaber out of an old bit of a kind of pipe or something they found, or finding a lamp and kind of turn it into something else. All that kind of invention just didn't kind of translate.
Well, the prequel movies they look odd. They really haven't aged well at all. I mean, I remember at the time Lucas said he was shooting the first movie the regular way, which is film, and then he said he mixed a couple of shots there, then on video, digital video, and then on from episode 2 and 3 it was all video. And yeah, he shows. 10 years later, he's pretty bad. I mean, the green screen or blue screen, whatever. I mean, you can clearly see these guys are just walking around on nothing, just
Yeah.
jumping around on a soundstage with green curtains, and then everything is just being superimposed to it. Animation is great, the CGI can be good, but it just doesn't gel. I mean, Doug, you were saying you like the new thing, or you're not a big fan the remake of the thing.
I I don't like the remake very much. I like the original a lot better.
Do you guys know
Just to be
that in the
honest.
remake, the thing that makes it look a bit odd, and I do like the remake actually. After that, it's not a remake; it's actually a prequel.
Well,
I think
Yeah.
yeah,
that
it's a prequel. I like it. I mean, but it's just not the same as the original to me.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think it was a nice idea because all this thing about prequels of them just kind of shoehorning things that don't need to be shoehorned. Like what they're doing now with a lot of Star Wars lore. Although I gotta say, I did enjoy Rogue One very much, but we don't want to go there now. We want to stick to Halloween. So, to this horror theme we got here. With the thing though, I actually thought it worked. It worked going back to the original story to find out what actually happened to the Dutch guys, because it's just an excuse, obviously, to create more adventure and more horror. But I think is a good enough excuse to make it
Yeah.
as a prequel.
I
And
think some things lend themselves to that, don't they? Like I was really excited for Prometheus as the like a kind of
yes,
prequel to Alien, and like it's such a frustrating film because there's things I absolutely love about it and
yeah,
things that are so frustrating about it, and the same with Covenant. It's like, but it was a brilliant idea to go instead of just retreading. Let's have kind of a alien running around a kind of spaceship haunted house killing people. Let's explore the mythos of it a bit more and kind of so I think prequels can work really well if they tie into the original material and add something to it. I mean, Rogue One did that really well of kind of if you're familiar with the kind of the original, then it just fills in these gaps in a really satisfying way. And I think the thing was it was well conceived in that point of view. I think it was reasonably well executed. I don't think it was a bad film, but
no,
it's
good.
just kind of let down by this kind of almost showing too much kind of thing. It's like you can show so much with CGI that it's just like you end up showing too much, and you don't build that kind of like the Carpenter originally said about Halloween. It's like this thing of the shape, this kind of thing you don't see is scarier than what you do see, and like when you can show anything, you end up if you're not able to self-censor, you end up kind of showing too much or making it too kind of cheesy or something.
Well, I mean, the thing with the new thing is that they mixed practical effects with visual effects, and the thing with CGI that I've noticed is that when you do like the body mutation kind of thing, the body horror, uh, if you're gonna do it all digital, do it all digital. But if you're gonna do it half practical, half digital, it does not work. It does not gel together. For example, one effect that never works is Mister Fantastic from the comics. It never works. I mean, even in the last one, with the one done just a couple of years ago, the one that had a recut, whatever it was, with that kid from Whiplash movie. That
Miles Teller,
yeah, Miles Teller. I mean, a couple of times that you see it, they still haven't been able to do convincing skin, especially
Yeah.
stretched out. I mean, they kind of just stretch the pores, and they think that kind of works. Skin is one of the things. It doesn't work on CGI. So if you're gonna do like a big ogre, like in Warcraft, so the whole environment has been done in CGI, right? The whole world. Okay, it works there. I mean, it works there as far as you like, if you like it.
Yeah.
If you like what you're seeing on the screen, it works. But the whole thing is CGI, so you kind of well, not the whole thing actually. There's actors there. Obviously, I was forgetting. Yeah, but when the ogres are on screen, you kind of buy into it because they're all CGI. So it's not like half of it is a bodybuilder and then the face is CGI.
Yeah.
So
The Trank Fantastic Four was like it was ultimately a disaster as a film, but it was an interesting experiment. I mean, I think it's totally inappropriate for Fantastic Four in the sense of it. Like it's never the Fantastic Four film I'd want to see. But at the same time, I kind of admired it for just this kind of Cronenbergian body horror take on this of like, if you really, if you were really Mr. Fantastic, it'd be a horrifying experience. It wouldn't be this kind of, yay, I've got these powers. It'd be like this, oh, what the hell's going on kind of thing. I'm Johnny Storm's permanent on fire. It really captured that kind of creepiness of it, which if you're a Fantastic Four fan, it's not what you want out of it. But just from a cinema fan's point of view, it's a really interesting thing of like, how did a studio greenlight such an exceptionally oddball take on material kind of thing?
Yeah, it was not a Fantastic Four comic book adaptation. It was more like a sci-fi movie about four guys that then mutate basically. So that's then you have,
it was like The Fly or something, Cronenberg's Fly, which I think is like a wonderful film. But it's kind of like if it hadn't been Fantastic Four, if it had been if it just been four other characters, I think people might have really liked it on the basis of it's a really interesting Cronenbergian kind of body horror sci-fi film.
Like a standalone movie not related to the comic book. But then they could not make it with four guys. They would have to make it either 3 or 5. because otherwise they'll go like, "Come on, man, that's a Fantastic Four." I mean, well, talking about Cronenberg and all that and Fly. Um, I mean, now we really have. I mean, you go on Netflix, you go on any streaming service, and there's like thousands. Well, not thousands, but hundreds of horror movies. And you got like the stuff that is the body horror, so the mutations. So you got like the pseudo Fantastic Fours, the Flies, and all that. Then you got a lot of the supernatural movies, where you got like ghost movies, haunting movies, the Ouija board movie, the Unfriended movies, and the Blair Witches retro versions, whatever. And then you got the other ones. You got the slasher ones, which you also, I think, the called what is it? No, it's not horror porn. Is what is it called?
Torture porn.
Torture porn. That's it. So I think that also falls into the same category, isn't it? The Hostel movies.
Yeah.
And all those other ones. So I mean, so I guess Scream series as well. So that's all the same crap. Halloween as well. So right now that's where we're at in the market. So I think obviously the body horror stuff lends itself to be more like the most expensive movies, obviously, and the most epic movies. I think that's what Josh Trank was doing, the guy that directed Fantastic Four. Before that, he did a movie which was very similar to the Fantastic Four, which was also about two or three teenagers which obtain these powers, these telekinetic powers, isn't it? And flying
Chronicle.
powers. Chronicle, that's it. And
Yeah.
he was out of this alien stuff they touched, right?
Yeah, and it was like a found footage film as well, which I think was one of the most interesting things about it, because it starts off being kind of found footage like Blair Witch, and you think, for me, kind of found footage is always a bit gimmicky and a bit boring because it limits what you can do on screen. But then because one of the characters had telekinetic powers, it actually had this brilliant shift in the middle of the film where you could actually get all these kind of unusual camera angles, because the Dane DeHaas character's kind of like manipulating the cameras and floating them around himself and stuff. So it was a kind of really interesting subversion of found footage, where it didn't, it managed to have its cake and eat it. It kind of, you had all of the intimacy in the early part of the film of like found footage and that conceit, and then later on you could have these kind of more epic kind of shots because of the nature of the story. Which, I think Trank, I don't have any idea what he's like as an individual. But as a filmmaker, I think he's got some talent, and it's a bit of a shame that Fantastic Four was, so badly conceived to begin with, because I think it's kind of it hangs around his neck as a filmmaker, whereas I kind of feel the same thing about Rian Johnson, to be honest, not to talk about Star Wars too much, but like I think Rian Johnson is a good filmmaker. I just think he made a film that Star Wars fans didn't want to see, or a significant proportion of them didn't want to see.
I like Looper, actually. I think it was
Looper's great.
I couldn't understand the ending, though.
Brick's great.
I couldn't understand by one side. I just couldn't understand why that ending, basically. But and I think it's all pretty good until really right about the end. With the closure of the movie. I don't think I don't know. I just felt a little bit not shoehorned, but maybe a little bit out of place. But because up until then, it was pretty cool. The ending is the ending. It's just probably should have been handled a little bit different. Just a few scenes there at the end. It just just felt a little bit too rushed. It's almost like you had written a big novel, which was great, like 400 pages, and then you get to the last 2 pages, and you kind of said, okay, and then that's it. So, it was like a strange way of closing the movie. That's all. Because apart from that, the movie was actually good. The problem with the Last Jedi is that the guy definitely wanted to bring that onto a franchise movie, and that is what is a mistake. I don't think they should have. Captain Kennedy and whatever, those guys, they should not have greenlit that script, because it's too convoluted to be a Star Wars movie. It just doesn't work. A Star Wars movie live, and then and obviously that's the whole criticism aimed at Kathleen, because she's not following on the steps of what George Lucas clearly defined from the beginning, which was very easily identifiable characters, a clear 3-act structure plot, and no bullshit. That's it. It's just black and white. And Irving Kershner, the director of Empire Strikes Back, says it as well in the interviews at the time of the release of the movie. Says that, these movies are about good and evil, black and white, clearly defined lines. That's it. So you go and grab a hipster like Ryan Johnson to grab that concept and turn it upside down and inside out. It doesn't work.
For me, like, Last Jedi was actually quite interesting in terms of the themes of it, in the sense of I actually thought it was quite a beautiful film from the point of view of promoting this idea that, like, mistakes are an inevitable part of life, and kind of learning from mistakes is really important, and not being, for instance, like the whole kind of Poe Dameron subplot seemed like a really, for our times, a really kind of interesting commentary on society, in the sense of, like, the person who appears to be virtuous or is shouting their virtue isn't always the person who's actually doing the good thing. And sometimes the person who's doing the good thing isn't the person that seems like they're doing the good thing. I mean, this kind of age we live in where people are virtue signaling constantly on social media, I thought it had interesting themes to it. It's just, I'm not a Star Wars fan, especially, so I kind of enjoyed it as a film, apart from some aspects of it that didn't work. But I could totally understand why, if you're a Star Wars fan, what you wanted was that nostalgic feeling of the original trilogy. And in both The Force Awakens and Last Jedi especially, it's like you don't get it. You don't get Luke Skywalker hanging around with Han Solo and Princess Leia and doing Star Warsy things. And so it's like anything, you've got to know your audience and listen to them. And it's disastrous when your audience complains about something to turn around and say, it's your fault as the audience because you didn't like it. You're a Russian bot, or you're kind of a racist or whatever. It's like, that's just insane. So that nonsense story about all these people tweeting about it is kind of Russian bots. It's like, I mean, not to get political about it, but it's like, it's not even a peer-reviewed piece of science. It's like, it's just some idiot with some patently kind of bad methodology where he's counting tweets and he's guessing which ones are bots or not. It's like insane.
I really, really tried to like that movie. I tried to convince myself I liked it. I tried to convince myself it was okay. And no matter what I did, I just kept coming back to, I decided I really hated it.
Yeah.
I think it's a terrible movie. I think as a standalone space action movie, it's fine. But as a Star Wars movie, it's complete and utter garbage.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. I think it's a terrible Star Wars film. I mean, it's like, I think that's, and I think if it was any other set of characters, people would look at it and go, I mean, if it wasn't Luke Skywalker, who's the hermit, it's like, I don't think anybody would care. But I can totally understand why, if you grew up with Luke Skywalker as like a hero, and then that's what you've waited all this time for, the return of Luke Skywalker, and that's what you get. Even though I think Luke's quite a sympathetic and heroic character in the film, he's not heroic in the kind of straightforward way that I think Star Wars fans are entitled to go, we waited all this time, we didn't get to see what we wanted to see. And I actually think even Ryan Johnson, it's like, so much of the film is compromised by it being a franchise Star Wars film. Like, if he, you kind of suspect that he kind of wanted to end it with the scene with kind of Kylo Ren and Rey after killing Snoke, kind of thing, where he asks it a joke, and it's like, that would have been a point to end the film. But it's like, you've got to have the extra bit, because you've got to wrap up the Luke Skywalker story, and you've got to have the Resistance do something. You've got to, you've got to have this kind of thin subplot that nobody cares about because it's a Star Wars thing, and you need an action beat. It's like, I just think, like, he was not the right choice for that material. And I don't think, to be fair, I don't like The Force Awakens either, because I think it's kind of like,
that's where I wanted to get to, because actually my relationship with The Last Jedi is actually interesting, because I was like, am I gonna see this? Do I really need to watch this? I mean, for the first time ever, I kind of thought, I'm gonna watch it, but I was like 50-50 in actually going to the cinema, spending money on it. Although thankfully I went to a place where South Europe, where the price of the ticket was really cheap, like €5 or something, which is literally the equivalent to $5. Because here in London, you pay $25 to watch a movie. Yes,
that's crazy.
It's ridiculous. And besides, with all the crap you spend at the foyer, a night at the movies is like a night at the opera. Yeah, you spend upwards to £100, 2 or 3 people in a movie theater. Yeah, crazy. You need to also almost mortgage your house to go to watch a movie here. So luckily, I watched it in South of Europe, and I was like, my problem that I got with this is like this. I watched it. I think it was too long. Okay, I think it was unnecessarily long. Was I bored by it? No. Was I annoyed by it? No. Like Doug was saying, I mean, like you were saying as well. It's just like another sci-fi movie. You go in, you come out. Next day you forgot about it. And that never happened with the Star Wars movie, even with the prequels. I actually went to watch the Phantom Menace twice because I wasn't sure if it was an actual garbage that I had felt the first time. And so a week or two later, I actually went to watch it again when it came out in 1999. And then, yeah, it is garbage. I kind of thought to myself, well, it's good to the point. But the funny thing was that when The Force Awakens came out, I went to watch it, and I went like, these characters don't say anything to me, man. I mean, Rey, is she annoying? Again, the same problem, Is she annoying? Not particularly, but do I like her? No. I mean, I don't particularly like the actress, yeah? She reminds me of Keira Knightley. Not as bad as her, That one is really annoying, the one from the Pirates of the Caribbean, yeah? I can't stand that chick. But this one here, the one that plays Rey, forgot her name. I don't care. But
Daisy Ridley.
She's not annoying, yeah. But it's like, I'm watching The Force Awakens and I'm thinking, does this looks like a TV show, like with a bunch of teenagers? No, not necessarily. I mean, the beginning was okay. It was kind of intriguing for the first half an hour, where they maybe J.J. Abrams was going to take the script, but then in the end, they end up just being he ended up being the copy of A New Hope, isn't it? And I only realized that after getting out of the cinema, and a friend that was with me said, "But listen, this was exactly the same as the first one, yeah? What first one? Well, the first one, the first Star Wars that came out. This was exactly the same." Oh, Jesus, man, you're right. I didn't realize that when I was in this actually watching it. I realized 5 minutes after exiting the movie. And the same thing with the Last Jedi. I went in, and you go in because you got the poster, right? And you got all the planet, which is made of salt, and the little dragster ships, whatever they are, like making those lines, cutting the salt, and showing that below it the soil is red. So that kind of looks really cool. Well, there you go. That's a palette that a Star Wars movie hasn't used yet. A red and white planet. That's kind of cool. And the poster got all the characters there. And okay, you're convinced you're gonna watch the movie. Yeah, of course you got to watch it. Yeah, you watch the other seven. You got to watch this one as well. But it did nothing for me. And I only felt that the scenes that were really fudged in was that stuff in the casino. I mean, like most people say, and I gotta agree with them, it's completely unnecessary. That whole sequence, the bunny rabbits that look like horse camels, whatever that is. I mean, it looked bad. The guys running around the casino, it looked bad, and it didn't do anything for the story. And Benicio del Toro, right?
Yeah, he was terrible in it. I don't know why they let him do that weird stuff. And
it's a thing that is bad. That is bad filmmaking there. That's the only thing I can say that is definitely bad filmmaking. You guys will agree with this or not? But
yeah, I agree with it. But
you don't bring in a third. It's not even a secondary character. It's not a supporting character. It's like a third. It's like a C character, right? A C grade character, yeah, that is only useful for a particular scene. Yeah? You don't bring that guy more than half the way through the movie, and this was not halfway. This was already about 60-something% of the way, almost 70% of the way. So almost just before you get into the third act, yeah, halfway through the second act, you don't bring out the character. You introduce this character, and then you explore this character a lot. There's too much screen time with this guy, and he's a no one. He's a nobody. He's not important for the story. He's only important for that particular sequence, yeah. And then you make this whole thing about him, that he's a traitor, and then he goes on to the beginning of the third act. And I'm thinking, okay, well, this is wrong. I mean, first of all, the whole sequence just doesn't work. It looks bad. And why are you giving so much time to Benicio del Toro character when he's just going to disappear comes the third act? You don't do that. You do that if the guy stays until the end, and then you take him on to the next episode. You know, like you introduce Yoda in the beginning of the second act of Empire Strikes Back, but then he's a main character. He's one of the main characters. That's how you do it. You don't spend so much screen time with a guy that is almost like an NPC basically.
But it's difficult to know. But it seemed to me watching it that like you could almost tell the bits that Rian Johnson was interested in and the bits that he wasn't. And the Kylo Ren Rey stuff, like I think he did really well at that dynamic and setting up an interesting dynamic between those two. So I think he was interested in exploring those characters. He was interested in exploring Luke. I can understand why a lot of people don't like what he did with Luke, but I think Rian Johnson was interested in Luke. I don't think he was interested in Finn at all. And I can kind of understand because Finn's a very boring character. I mean, you know, he ought to be an interesting character. Someone who used to be a stormtrooper who then decided he didn't want to be. And in some ways, he's an interesting character because he's a little bit of a coward and he's kind of learning not to be. It's like he should be an interesting character. But John Boyega doesn't seem like a very good actor and he doesn't seem like a well-written character and he has nothing to do. And so they just make stuff up for him to do that's like there. And it's kind of, it's a bit like that with Rose kind of thing. I don't think she was the best written character kind of thing. I think she was there to be kind of didactic and just kind of like say speechy things at the appropriate time to convey the message of the film kind of thing, rather than be an interesting character. I mean, it's a funny thing, like to me, from the outside, like the original trilogy of Star Wars is very much a kind of science fiction fantasy story where it's like it's got those archetypes of classic fantasy of kind of good versus evil and kind of black and white storytelling and the kind of the pleasure of that. And then you've got the prequels, which are kind of exploring all of this kind of grey stuff of like this descent of this character of Darth Vader, which I always found interesting. I mean, I think they're really badly executed, but the story is really interesting of like, how did this Jedi become this Sith? And if Rian Johnson had made Revenge of the Sith, I think it would have been a brilliant film because I think Rian Johnson is interested in grey characters that aren't all good or aren't all bad or kind of are some mixture of the two or the sort of perspectival nature of like, what's the truth of what happened to kind of Kylo Ren? Is it the way he describes it? Is it the way Luke describes it? Is it something in the middle? It's like, but nobody wanted that out of the last time that Luke Skywalker's ever on screen alive kind of thing. You know, no one wanted that. They wanted those original trilogy vibes. They wanted kind of a heroic story of Luke coming back, you know, Han Solo being heroic. And it's just a bad fit for the material. And like, I can understand why people don't like it. I can understand why people are angry about it, especially if they think, you know, this kind of where they've used legacy characters is kind of more about kind of, you know, political agendas rather than just pure storytelling agendas, which, you know, who knows? I don't know whether that's right or not, but I can certainly understand why people feel like that. I think a lot of it's J.J. Abrams' fault though. Like, J.J. Abrams is great at setting up mysteries. He's really bad at explaining what they are. I mean, I don't know if either of you guys ever watched Alias, the TV show that J.J. Abrams did. But it was like, I really liked it. It was a brilliant sort of spy espionage thriller series that set up a whole bunch of mysteries, really fascinating mythology. And the end was terribly disappointing because they had no idea what it all meant. They clearly had no idea what it all meant. Same with Lost. Same with kind of any of the things he does. It's like, I think he set up a series of mysteries and he had no idea what the resolution to those things are. Rian Johnson comes in and fills in.
Yeah. And
then people don't like the way Rian Johnson is, but I don't know what, I mean, another person other than Rian Johnson might have made a more crowd-pleasing film. But at the end of the day, it's J.J. Abrams that decided to not have Leia, Luke, and Han on screen together ever. You know, it's J.J. Abrams that decided to have this, you know, someone like Snoke with kind of no explanation of who they are or where they come from or what they are. It's J.J. Abrams that decided to have the First Order be just the Empire with a different name and the rebellion, you know, the Resistance be the rebellion with a different name. It's J.J. Abrams that made all those lazy storytelling decisions in the first place. And it's like, I think that's kind of thing. It's like Force Awakens did so well partly because people were so curious to see Star Wars come back, and then they kind of realized it's not as good as it used to be, and it's probably never going to be as good as it used to be because it's a kind of nostalgia thing. It was of its time.
Well, it was mostly because, you know, you got the series ending back in technically back in 1983, and you really just wanted a follow up to that. I mean, I was back in '93 when I was 10 years old or whatever. I was hoping that in 1986 there would be another one, but it never came. And then I was hoping that again in '88 or '89 they would do another one. Never came. But the thing was that with those three original films, the original ones. And I mean, you guys, what do you guys prefer, the original trilogy or the prequels? To be honest,
I think you got to say the original trilogy, but I do. I like the original trilogy in the sense of like that they're a better combination of story and execution. In the sense of they do what they're supposed to do and they do it very well.
And
but I don't. For me, that story isn't very interesting. Right. Whereas the story, the prequels, they execute it really badly, but the story of this character descending into Darth. I mean, Darth Vader for me is my favorite character in Star Wars because he's just really interesting. Like Luke Skywalker's not interesting. I mean, he's just he's so milquetoast. It's like there's nothing interesting about him. And Han Solo's one-dimensional. Princess Leia's not interesting. I mean, maybe this is sacrilege to people that grew up with this stuff. I mean, I was more of a Star Trek guy, so it's like that's my.
You gotta be careful with the things you say.
But I mean, I just think Star Wars is a very small world. Like people talk about it like it's this big kind of universe of ideas, and you could tell any type of story. And it's like, no, you look at the successful Star Wars films, and you've got the original trilogy, and then you've got Rogue One, which is just an interesting thing, but it's just filling in backstory for the original. A New Hope.
I actually like very much. I
like them, but it's not different. It's not a sort of it's not doing anything new. It's not expanding the universe.
True, yes.
You've got The Force Awakens, which is a retread of A New Hope with kind of CW actors in it. It's like that's fine, but it's like it's not expanding the world. It's not doing anything interesting. It's like The Last Jedi tried to do something different. I can understand why it failed because I can understand that Star Wars is the kind of thing people go like. The things I like about it, I want to get out of it. It's like, it doesn't feel like Star Wars if you make it too different. In the same way that the new Star Treks to me don't feel like Star Trek films. It's like because they're too different from the original Star Trek. But I think this is the problem that if people were had a bit more less emotional attachment to it, they'd look at it and go like, Star Wars it's not really that interesting a world. It's not a world where you can tell 12 films worth of stories in it. It's like it's that thing in stories, isn't it, where it's like you told the story of the most interesting thing that ever happened in this world, and the most interesting thing that ever happened in this world is Darth Vader killing the Emperor because he suddenly his sympathy for his son is reignited. That's the single most interesting event in the universe of Star Wars, and you told that story in 1983. It's like the rest of the stories are just they're fundamentally less interesting.
Which one do you prefer?
I think the difference is.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I think the difference is in the way we make movies now. Back then, like the first Star Wars movie was meant to be a self-contained movie. George Lucas didn't know that he would ever get to make another movie, so he just did a self-contained story. And that's the way movies used to be. Now when they make a movie, they make everything too open-ended just in case they get to make a sequel. And I think that might be a little bit where the new Star Wars movies kind of fail. Everything it was too open-ended. They wanted to pay service to the old movies, but they couldn't make one self-contained story. They wanted to set up the rest of the story. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the thing that here's my interpretation of it. In terms of filmmaking, I think the original movies work, and they're superior because of one simple reason. Like Doug was saying now, it was a standalone movie, So the Star Wars, the movie that was released in 1977, was a Western set in outer space. It was advertised as that straight from the beginning, and it had sword and sorcery elements in it, and that's what made it slightly different. That's what made it special, and that's, I think, is what obviously it is. It has been analyzed and it has been agreed upon. That's what drove the audiences to the box office, It was a Western set in space with sword and sorcery. And it was a nice little original, great idea, from George Lucas. He mixed two things that appeal for both, general audience in US. You got the Western, you got something set in space, and then you got an old mythological kind of arc. You got the hero, which is a young guy. He befriends a wizard. It's clearly a wizard because he's talking about something that cannot be seen, and he's got powers. He uses makes gestures and he controls people's minds and all that. So you got mysticism. Everybody knows this already, right? You got mysticism. You got good old fashioned villain and heroes, right? So that works, and it was well executed. But again, let's not forget that the movie, if the movie was made by George Lucas only, like a one-man band, it would have been another failure. Meaning that the movie works because it's the sum of its parts. You got John Williams, you got Harrison Ford coming through there as holding up the cast, kind of tying up the cast. This trio of actors, which are not that great, at least at the time. Mark Hamill, very young guy, is a one-sided actor, and Carrie Fisher, she's feisty. She's got moments, but again, it's not prime material as actress. Again, very young. But Harrison Ford, in his swagger, he wins the day. He basically he kind of eats the scenes where he's at. He chomps up the scenes where he's at. So obviously he becomes the most successful actor from that trio. But really, I mean, it is the sum of his parts. It was the editing done by Marshall Lucas, George Lucas' wife at the time, and it was the special effects, obviously, and all that. What follows up, though, it's a very intelligent thing because Gary Kurtz, the producer, just recently died, actually. And with Lawrence Kasdan in the script, Lawrence Kasdan was not writing the original script. That was just George Lucas. It becomes like it becomes what I usually call is a good cinema coming out of kind of almost forced options, in where to take the story, and out of a group of minds, great scripts and great movies come out. So you got Lawrence Kasdan, which at the time was doing good scripts, not so good now. And it was Gary Kurtz behind the scenes, kind of pulling the strings, and Lucas kind of took a back seat as well when Empire Strikes Back, and they come out with a very little interesting thing. We'll focus on puppets now and stop motion in the second movie, yeah? In terms of design and effects, and the great samurai master. Obviously Yoda is a samurai master for all purposes and intents. It's a puppet, so it's again it's going against norm. So it's subverting your expectations, and this is the thing that Rian Johnson is constantly being criticized. That is forcing things in. He's not subverting expectations. He's just bending expectations. It's more almost like.
I think that's a good point, though, because it's easy to forget that when Star Wars came out, there was nothing else like it, and there'd been nothing else like it. It's kind of that famous story of like George Lucas wanting to do Flash Gordon and couldn't get the rights, so he kind of,
yes,
it's this thing of no one had ever seen anything like it. Modern Star Wars exists in a context where we've already seen all of this, and the fan base is totally different. When Empire Strikes Back came out, people were invested in the story and they were fans, but there wasn't a kind of legacy of fandom of people having a deep expectation of what it could be. So if you took the story in different directions, or in Return of the Jedi you introduce Ewoks or something, it's like you can expand the world and people are more accepting of it. I think, understandably, it's not a criticism of anyone, it's just the way it is. It's like when you build up a large body of canon, people are like, yeah, but this new thing, if it doesn't meet my expectations, it doesn't fit, I don't like it, I want more of what I've fallen in love with. And I think it's that where it's like, I think basically the only way Star Wars succeeds is by retreading the original trilogy, and that's fine. But even Star Wars fans, I think, are going to get bored of that. And I think it's going to be really difficult to reinvent Star Wars in a way where you preserve what people like about it and you add a whole bunch of new stuff. You know, I think some of these things are like you have to decide who you're making something for. And if you're making it for hardcore Star Wars fans, you have to go give them what they want, you know, and then they'll be happy. You
Well,
know?
Gary Kurtz, he laughed after The Empire Strikes Back because he was criticizing George Lucas, you know, that the toy became more important than the film. So the commercial side of the filmmaking became the center of Lucasfilms. And yeah, I mean, he's got a point. But again, I still think what they've done with Return of the Jedi is brilliant. It's a brilliant movie. I think it's well structured. I'm so with the Ewoks, but I love Jabba the Hutt and the whole thing in the palace of Jabba is great. And again, subverting expectations. You've been hearing about Jabba the Hutt from the first movie. The moment they meet Han Solo, he says to them, you know, I got a problem with this guy, you know, as a Jabba the Hutt, you know. So they'd be talking about it, And luckily, Lucas did not include the Jabba the Hutt that he actually shot for the original movie. Luckily, in the original film, because then they were able to do what they did in the third movie, which was grab a giant slug and make him the gangster. So again, that's out of you know, it's really out of a magic trick hat. You know, it's a meeting of minds. You know, these guys came together and they thought how to make this as exciting as possible and subvert audiences' expectations.
But I
Now,
think
the problem that you got with the new movies is that they're just re-stepping those same steps. They're just going at it and thinking, okay, so they've done that back then. Yeah, but they've done that back then for a point. The point was to make good movies, movies that would surprise people, right? And that's why they made only three, and that was it. So the problem with the prequels is that George Lucas, and you know, I got to give him credit for that. He says, I want to do something different, and I was hoping that the audiences would like. The problem is that he's never been a great director, and he's not a great writer either. Not to say that he's not a guy with great imagination, which he is. His creativity is great. It's just the way that he writes the story is not. Star Wars, the original movie, is a boring movie. I mean, if it was not for the effects and the music, try this experience at home one day, yeah? Watch Star Wars from the beginning and mute it. Watch it without sound. I can promise you, halfway through the movie, you will be asleep. Then you will wake up again for the final battle, yeah? But that old bit in the middle where Luke finds the droids and finds Obi-Wan, and they're talking about the Force, and then they got to go. It just is too boring, you know? Just thankfully, the movie was saved in the editing, but script-wise, what Lucas actually wrote is a very small, limited movie, apart from the battle at the end, yeah?
Well, I think what Lucas is good at though is like because I mean, Star Wars is famously this thing of like he had 9 movies planned out and all this kind of stuff. It's like he's brilliant. He's like Tolkien in the sense of he's a brilliant world builder. In a sense, he created this incredibly rich fantasy science fiction world with these kind of surprising, like you say, taking things from kind of, you know, samurais or kind of westerns and mixing genres together in a way that nobody had seen on the big screen before. And the problem with the prequels, I don't think, is kind of, it's not even necessarily the scripts. It's he doesn't care about actors. I mean, if you had Adam Driver playing Anakin Skywalker, and you had a director, like say what you like about Rian Johnson in terms of what he did with Last Jedi in terms of the story, but in terms of the performances he got out of people, I don't think anyone who's not, you know, hating on the film just because they can't stand it emotionally would look at Adam Driver's performance and go, it was a terrible performance or something. Like he managed to make that character, who is quite a despicable character, sympathetic and kind of nuanced. If that should have been Anakin Skywalker, that not Hayden Christensen like a plank of wood, you know, not Natalie Portman like a plank of wood. It's Lucas. There's nothing wrong with Lucas's ideas. It's just it's the weakness of strength, isn't it? The things he's good at.
Yeah,
special effects, world building, the fantasy elements, the science fiction elements. He's so good at those. He just thinks the rest, and he's really wrong, because for an audience to engage with a story, you have to care about the humanity in a character, even if it's a droid.
Yeah,
and
that's what I mean, wrong. Yeah.
That managed to be captured in the original trilogy. Who knows where it came from? Just the cast.
That's what I'm saying. The original trilogy was in the hands of several people. That's the thing. You know, because again, he stepped out from the director's chair passed on to Richard Mark and Irving Kershner, and those guys were legitimate, very good directors. The Irving Kershner and many years behind him. Yeah, 40 years of working in the industry, and he had been a mentor of Lucas, and he had Kurtz producing the movie, and he very sane producer, knowing exactly the beats that the story should have, and guiding Lawrence Kasdan in script as well, which obviously wrote the script for the last two movies. So Lucas is working in a team. It's not his show. I mean, it's his idea, but it's not his show. Let's not forget he's working with 20th Century Fox money, and that's how you work in a big production. Doesn't matter if you're the guy with the idea and the director. You're still gonna get the credit. You're gonna show up, and everybody's gonna kiss your feet. But while you're shooting and while you're editing the movie, you're still working for someone. It's not his show, although it was produced with his label. Yeah. When you get to the prequels, Lucas is a one man show. He doesn't even care how the movie is going to look like. He just wants to dictate what he thinks it should be. Now, again, I give him credit because he's trying to tell a story of a time gone by. He likes the pageantry. I think that's what he's trying to do in the prequels. He wants to show this big universe, these worlds, and how they used to look like. This idea, exotic idea that he has, that what his universe used to look like before the Empire or whatever. It's just, again, it's like you say, he's not a people's person. He's not an actor's director. Bad casting. The movies don't look good after all these years. I mean, I don't know. Doug, by the way, I'm going to acknowledge the chat now because there's some people been coming here to drop a few comments. Very nice of them. So I'm just going to say.
Before you do that, Lewis, I just
Yeah,
want to. I've just got to shoot off, so I just want to say thanks for having me on. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet Doug. Good luck with Lone Wolf.
Thank you.
Fingers crossed. It looks like a really good book. I hope it gets fully funded because it deserves it. And thanks for everyone listening, and see you again sometime.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Cheerio, guys.
Bye-bye. See you later.
Well, I hate to leave too, but I'm going to have to actually jump off as well. I didn't want to interrupt you while you were talking, though.
Oh, all right. Okay. That's fine. I was just going to acknowledge the chat here anyway, just before we go, because we got just some guys that were nice to come by. So I'm just going to say hello to them. So we got Ethan Richard, and we got Pixel Trader. He's been here. I'm not sure if he's still on, but he's been here. And the Needle Mover Society. Yeah, those guys have been here. Been a couple of times. Okay, so that's it. Everybody there.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on, and I really enjoyed the chat. I mean, it's always good to hear other people's opinions, and I think a lot of people agree with you on the new Star Wars movies.
Yeah, well, we went to the side from Halloween to talking about Halloween, which was the idea, and we went to Star Wars, but that's fine. I think we still, obviously, we all agreed to which ones are the best and which ones are not. I still like Rogue One very much, though. So, but anyway, thank you very much for coming by. Then, well, that's it. I'm gonna finish the live stream now, and thank you for anyone that came along. All right. Have everyone a good night. Bye bye.